This right here is the viral R36 console, and this thing has gone viral many times on TikTok. We're talking millions and millions of views. And so welcome to our series called TikTok Tech Busters, to see if TikTok tech is actually good or not, and if you should spend your hard-earned money on this stuff. Questions we're gonna be answering today is, what is the difference between the RS3 versus Max versus Ultra versus Pro? How many games it has? Should you actually buy it? And many more things. If you have questions, leave them in the comments, but let's get it started. All right, so here is the box that it comes in. This exact one is the R36 Max, and we're gonna open it up and see what we get in the box here. Opening it up, it's a nice little manual, and it does come in this nice little box. Oh, look at that thing. It's actually pretty fire little box it comes with. Get a little customer support guide. Then here is the actual console itself. Take a look here. You get a USB-C charging cable right here. You have a screen protector, and then you have the little manual. All right, so one of the questions that I had was, what is the actual difference between the R36s, R36 Max, R36 Ultra, R36 Pro? There's like a ton of different names. They all look extremely similar, but they're like, is there actually any difference? So some of them do vary slightly in the button organization. Mainly on the home screen, they just have different shaped buttons and sometimes different shaped speakers. With the R36s model, it has a 3.5-inch display. And that one has a slightly lower resolution, 640 by 480, so slightly lower resolution. Not as big of a screen. Then you have the R36 Ultra. This one has a 4-inch display, as well as the R36 Max. There's other names, but there are usually just these three variants. And then the R36 Max has the best battery of the three, but the R36 Max has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. The Ultra has a 3,000 milliamp hour battery, and the R36s has a 3,200 milliamp hour battery. And they claim that the Ultra has Wi-Fi as well. It means you probably could download things onto it from it, but basically all the games and the operating system is all coming from this little SD card on the side. And so there's a separate slot where you can add more games if you want to download more, or if you want to have on-game memory, you can download it onto this separate SD card. But that's where everything comes from. The rest of it is just like, it's just hardware to run the games. The actual differences are pretty small. You'll probably be just fine with any of the consoles. This one does have a little bit better battery, but other than that, like they run the same exact operating system. They all have the same processing power. So generally they are pretty much the same. If you have more questions, I'm going to leave a document in the video that'll explain more of the differences. Feel free to check that out. When it comes to the build quality and the actual just hardware of the console, it's like a pretty similar size to like my iPhone, for example. This is iPhone 15 Pro Max, slightly more wide and boxy and thick. It's made of full plastic. This one is the clear variant and it's red. On the front, it has these little speakers that actually have the shape of like a soccer goal. Then we have a little soccer ball for the button. In the middle, we have a select button and a start button. Then we have two joysticks that can also click in. Then we have a arrow pad, and then we have buttons Y, X, A, and B. And then we also have 4 triggers on the back. There's also these little rounded parts on the back that help to increase the grip. I wouldn't say the grip is amazing still, but it definitely helps a little bit to have those nice little bubbles. Then you have the power button and the get out of the game button on the left side, so you can click either one of those. You also have your SD card, which houses all of the games. Then on the other side, we have a second SD card slot, which will enable you to either put more games on or have on-game memory. Then above that is the volume up and down port. Another thing that's really cool about this console is on the bottom, you have 2 USB-C ports. One says DC, that is where you charge the actual console through. Then in the middle, you have a headphone jack, so you can plug in headphones. And then there's one that says OTG, and this is one where you can actually plug in other controllers, other accessories, so that you could actually play this with an actual controller from one of those game consoles, which is pretty sweet. So when it comes to the actual hardware, it's a pretty solid little console, I'm not gonna lie. Feels good in the hands, and the buttons definitely kind of shake a little bit, and it's not like the most like premium thing you've ever touched. All right, so when it comes to the actual software of this thing, as you can see, it says it's an open source game console, and you have our loading screen, but you can see the screen does look very nice, which I do appreciate about this. Nice little animation to get into it. This is like the main home screen that you'll see a lot, right? You got the user's manual, you got the all games, and then you have favorites. This is probably one of the areas they'll stick to the most, but then it also goes down into all of the actual different consoles that you can pick from. There's like tons of different consoles, right? You can also switch between this mode as well. You can also filter the games by text. Basically, every time you do hit the R button though, it turns off the game and then it brings you back to this main menu. But this is the thing that has all of the actual games right here. We have our little SD card, and if you want to load more games on there, you can do it through this one. It does have this nice little clicking noise. And this is how you just navigate through all of it. As you can see, what year the console was right here and how many games it has for that one. So it's a nice little interface. I do like the way it looks. The battery indicator is right up here. You can also switch with the back buttons as well. But yeah, as you can see right here, it shows the actual controller that you'll be emulating with this as well. So like you can see this one is slightly different. It has similar stuff, but it doesn't have 2 joysticks. This one is, well, yeah, like some of these are crazy, and that's why you'll have to adapt to each game. All right, so when it comes to the actual games that this thing has on it, this is where it really excels. You'll see many listings that'll say it has 15,000 games, 30,000 games, and it's true, there is thousands of games on here. A lot of times they use that as marketing because some of the games are not playable. This is true. There's still thousands of games that are playable. I'm gonna include a list in that same document down below that'll show all of the games that are on this console, so you can kind of look around and see if there's any special games that you guys want to play, maybe you played in your childhood. But if you just look at it from the home screen, Mime Arcade, Atari, PC Engine, Nintendo Family Controller, Super Famicom, Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, Sega SG-1000, Mega Drive, Sega 32X, Dreamcast, Game Gear, Neo Geo Pocket, PlayStation, PSP, Amstrad, CPS, CPS2, and CPS3. And those are all the ones that are listed on here. So in total, I just added up, my console has 18,536 games installed on there. That's absolutely insane. Obviously, take that with the knowledge that some of them will not work, but a lot of them will. All right, when it comes to the actual gaming quality of the games, every single game is going to be slightly different in its performance. They're not exactly all built for this console, but it's kind of like a jack of all trades. It can do everything, and then it doesn't really do everything perfectly, if that makes sense. So there will be certain games where the buttons don't really line up. They work with the other console format of the buttons, and you have to just kind of figure out how the console works with those kinds of buttons. And also, the aspect ratio is something that comes into play as well. Because it has this 1:1 aspect ratio, some of the screens are cropped, and so you can still play the ones that have like a wider aspect ratio. They're cropped on the edges, but you still can play all the games though. But like literally, you could play this thing for days on end because there's just so many games. And I love the fact that it still has the memory feature as well, and so you can play the games, and it keeps your progress as well on the memory card. So I really like that a lot. Overall, the gameplay is pretty sick on this thing. All right, so when it comes to the actual battery life of the console, this will also vary depending on which variant you decide to get between the S, the Ultra, and the Max. And obviously the one that has the best battery is the Max because it has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. And so looking at with the Max, you're looking at 4 to 6 hours of gameplay depending on which game you're playing and how intensive it is on the processing power. The S version or the Ultra version, those have smaller batteries, and so you'll be looking at more like 2 to 4 hours of battery life instead of the 4 to 6 that you're getting with the Max. Also, if you leave it on standby where you just turn the screen off, this also will drain the battery slowly, a lot slower, but you will need to charge it. So at the end of the day, if you are wondering, should you buy this console or not? And I think that for some people, this console is absolutely perfect because this thing actually is pretty sweet. It plays a ton of old games, and there's thousands of the games on there. And so if you're looking for that, absolutely buy the console. If you're looking for like performance that like a Nintendo Switch or even like an actual console like a PS5 or an Xbox, you're not exactly going to get that same experience because it is just a little handheld device. But like for me, this thing is perfect because all I want to do is play a bunch of these awesome old games that I played as a kid, and I'm able to play them. I'll have them all linked in the description. I'll have the best listing for each of the variants. TikTok Tech Buster, this is an absolute dub. Would recommend it.